Mama Izenwa was 72 years old, lying flat on her back in a hospital bed with tubes in her arm and tears running silently into her pillow, when her only daughter leaned close and whispered something that would change both their lives forever. "Mom," Adora said, her voice low and measured like someone reading from a script they had rehearsed many times. "Don't call me again unless it's a real emergency." Then she straightened up, fixed her handbag on her shoulder, and walked out of the room without looking back. Mama Izenwa stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. The machines beeped. The nurses moved quietly in the hallway. And something inside her chest, something that had nothing to do with the surgery, began to crack. 3 weeks later, she discovered her daughter had blocked her number. 6 months after that, Adora would walk into a lawyer's office dressed in expensive fabric and a wide, confident smile, already certain she was about to inherit everything her mother had spent a lifetime building. But the moment the will was opened, that smile would collapse, because every dollar, every property, every acre of land, every investment account had been left entirely to the man Adora had always dismissed as the help. And what happened next would expose a betrayal so deep, so calculated, and so cold that everyone in that room would walk out changed. Before we dive deeper into the story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Stories like this one drop every week, and you don't want to be the last to know. 2. Understand how a mother and daughter arrived at that moment. You have to go back to the beginning. Mama Izenwa Obi was not born into wealth. She was born into hunger. She grew up in a small town in southeastern Nigeria, the fifth of 7 children, in a family where food was rationed by the spoonful and new clothing came once a year if you were lucky. Her father worked as a tailor. Her mother sold firewood at the market before sunrise, and groundnut soup from a roadside stand after dark. Every naira that passed through their hands had already been promised to something else. Izen watched her parents work themselves thin, and she made a decision at 11 years old. She would not live like this. Whatever it took, however long it took, she would build something different. She studied with borrowed textbooks. She passed every exam placed in front of her. She won a scholarship at 16 that took her to Lagos, and then another at 20 that brought her to the United States. She arrived in Atlanta with 1 suitcase, $300, and a ferocity that nobody who met her ever forgot. She cleaned offices. She served food. She took extra shifts when other workers went home. She enrolled in night school and studied business while her feet ached from standing 12 hours a day. She saved money the way other people saved their prayers, carefully, deliberately, trusting that one day it would be enough. By her mid-30s, she owned her first property, a modest duplex in Georgia that she rented out and maintained herself. By 40, she had 4 properties. By 50, she had developed a portfolio that included commercial real estate, farmland, and a series of long-term investments that her financial advisor called visionary. She had built a fortune from nothing, and she had done it while raising a daughter alone after her husband died of a heart attack when Adora was only 9 years old. Adora was Izen's miracle, her reason, the one person she believed all the sacrifice had been for. She paid for the best schools. She bought Adora a car The month she turned 18. Her university education without complaint. Even when the bills were steep enough to delay Ethan's own retirement plans. When Adora graduated and moved into her first apartment, Ethan furnished it entirely, saying nothing about the cost, asking for nothing in return. "You are everything I worked for," she told her daughter on graduation day, pressing both hands to Adora's face. "Everything I ever did was so you would never have to struggle the way I did." Adora smiled and hugged her mother and said, "Thank you, Mom." But gratitude, it turns out, has an expiration date. And by the time Adora was in her late 30s, hers had long since passed. What Ethan did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that her daughter had been living a lie for years. Adora presented a polished, successful image. A good job. A nice car, elegant dinners posted on social media. But behind the surface, the walls were caving in. She had made several failed investments based on advice from people she should never have trusted. She had developed a taste for luxury that her income could not sustain. She had borrowed money from multiple sources, including two that operated outside the bounds of anything legal. Her credit cards were maxed. Her savings were gone. She had even quietly taken out a second mortgage on her own apartment and spent every dollar of it. Within 18 months, she was drowning. And she had decided, without telling anyone, that her mother's estate was her life jacket. The plan was simple. Wait. Stay close enough to appear loving. Make sure no one else got too comfortable. And when the time came, collect what she had already decided belonged to her. It was a plan that had been running quietly in the background for years. And then Mama Ethan fell and broke her hip, and the plan was forced out into the open. The surgery was serious. A full hip replacement at 72 is not a minor procedure. The doctors were direct and unsparing. She would need weeks of bed rest followed by months of careful rehabilitation. She could not drive. She could not cook for herself. She could not manage stairs without assistance. Someone needed to be with her, ideally around the clock, at least in the beginning. Ethan called Adora from her hospital bed the evening after surgery. "Ada," she said. Her voice was still thick from anesthesia. "I need you." Adora exhaled, long, slow, the kind of exhale that contains a whole argument. "Mom, I have work." "I know, but it's just for a few weeks," the doctor said. "I heard what the doctor said. You'll be fine. You're strong." "Adora, I just had surgery. I can't be alone." "You're not alone. There are nurses. I'm going home in 3 days. There won't be nurses at home." Another pause. "I'll see what I can do," Adora said. She did not come. Day 3 came and went. Ethan returned home in a medical transport vehicle, helped into her house by a young driver who made sure she was seated safely and then left. The house was quiet. The kitchen was exactly as she had left it before going to the hospital. Nothing had been prepared. No food, no medication organized, no arrangements made. She sat in her armchair and called Adora. No answer. She called again the next morning. "Mom, I'm at work. Can I call you back?" "Ada, there's nothing in the house. I can't stand long enough to cook. I need order delivery. I can barely walk to the door." "Mom," the word came out Hard clipped like a door shutting. I do this right now. The calls continued. Like that for 2 weeks, always too short. Always ending with Adora saying she would figure something out, that she would come soon, that she was very busy right now, but she hadn't forgotten. She never came. Then came the morning Asen fell in her kitchen. She had been trying to reach a glass on a low shelf, moving slowly the way the physical therapist had shown her, when her hip gave out and she went down hard. She hit the floor and lay there, the cold tiles against her cheek. Her phone just barely in reach. She called Adora. It rang and rang. She called again. Voicemail. She sent a text. Mom fell on the floor. Please call. She lay on that kitchen floor for 7 hours. Neighbors eventually heard her calling out and came through the back door she had left unlocked. They helped her up. They stayed with her until she was settled. One of them, a retired school teacher named Miss Patricia, held Asen's hand and said softly, "Honey, you need someone here with you." That night Asen found out why her daughter had not answered. Adora had been on a weekend trip. Her social media was full of photos, sunglasses, restaurant tables, drinks raised toward the camera, smiling wide. Asen stared at those photos for a long time. She said nothing to anyone, but something inside her went quiet and still, the way a flame goes still before it goes out. When Adora finally called 3 days later, Asen answered on the first ring. "I fell," she said. "I know, I saw your message. Are you okay? I was on the floor for 7 hours, Ada." Silence. "I was going to call you back. 7 hours. Mom, where were you?" The pause that followed was full of careful calculation. "I needed a break," Adora said finally. "I've been stressed. I'm dealing with things you don't know about." "You needed a break," Asen repeated. "Yes. And I was on the floor. I said I'm sorry." "You didn't say that." "Mom." The voice shifted. Got harder, sharper. "I've spent my whole life in the shadow of your problems. Your house, your business, your health. I have my own life. I can't drop everything every time something happens. I'm your mother." "Then hire somebody. You have enough money. That's what it's for." Then the call ended. Asen held the phone in her lap. For a long time after that, Miss Patricia, who was sitting across from her with a cup of tea, watched her carefully. "Do you want me to help you find someone?" she asked gently. Asen looked up. Her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set. "Yes," she said. "I think it's time." That was how Chaik Okafor came into the house. He arrived on a Tuesday morning with a small bag, a neat appearance, and the kind of calm that some people are simply born with. He was 35. He had been working as a professional caregiver for 8 years, first in a facility, then privately. His references were impeccable. Every former client who could still speak described him in almost identical terms. Patient, honest, genuinely kind. Asen was not interested in kindness at first. She was businesslike. She gave him the rundown of her medical needs, her daily schedule, her preferences about food and privacy. She made clear that she was not looking for a friend. Chaik listened without interrupting. Then he nodded and said, "Understood. I'll follow your lead." By the end of the first week, she was following his. He was meticulous about her medication. He cooked Nigerian dishes from memory, telling her his own mother had taught him before she passed. He drove her to appointments without complaint and waited without being asked. When she had bad nights, when the pain kept her awake, and the silence of the house felt heavy, he sat with her in the living room, without making it into a production. Just present, calm, reading or listening to quiet music, so she did not feel alone. He made her laugh, not forced, not performative. He had a dry wit and a talent for observation that caught her off guard at first. She found herself telling him things, small things, memories, stories from Nigeria, stories about building her business, things she had not spoken aloud in years. One evening, she told him about the time she had arrived in America with $300 and spent 40 of it on a coat because an Atlanta winter had nearly killed her in the first week. Chike laughed genuinely. $300 and you spent 40 on a coat. I had to survive, she said, mock serious. That's not survival. That's financial strategy. She laughed so hard she pressed a hand to her hip. It was the first time she had laughed like that in months. Eudora noticed. She had resumed occasional visits once it became clear the caregiver was permanent. She came dressed sharply, acting casual, watching everything. She watched the way her mother smiled when Chike brought tea without being asked. She watched the way Ethan asked his opinion on things. She watched, and her jaw tightened, and something cold began to move through her. One afternoon, she cornered Chike in the kitchen while Ethan was resting. I want to talk to you about something, she said, her voice light and pleasant. The way someone speaks when the pleasantness is entirely artificial. Chike turned from the stove. Of course. My mother is getting too attached to you. I want you to start creating some distance. Be professional. Stop being her friend. Chike looked at her steadily. Your mother is my patient. Being present and building trust is part of what I do. It improves recovery outcomes. I'm not asking for a medical explanation. I'm asking you to back off. With respect, Chike said quietly. Your mother hired me. I follow her direction. Adora's expression shifted. The pleasantness fell away completely. I'm going to be very direct with you, she said. My mother is a wealthy woman. When she passes, everything she has is going to her family, not to staff. I'm offering you the chance to leave gracefully with a very generous severance. $50,000. Walk away clean. The kitchen was very quiet. Chike said nothing for a moment. Then he turned back to the stove. I'm not interested, he said simply. The silence behind him was different now. Excuse me? I said I'm not interested. Your mother needs care. I'm providing it. If she decides to let me go, I'll go. But I won't leave because you want me to. He heard her leave the kitchen. Without another word. She came back 2 weeks later with a different number. $100,000. He turned that down too without hesitation, without drama. But the offers should have warned him because Adora had moved from persuasion to something far more dangerous. It started with small things disappearing. A gold bracelet Asen had worn for 30 years. An envelope of cash she kept in a bedside drawer. A ring that had belonged to her husband. Then the police arrived. 2 officers, polite but businesslike, responding to a report filed by Adora. alleging that items had gone missing from the home and pointing directly at the caregiver. Chaik stood very still while they asked their questions. Esin stood beside him, leaning on her cane, her face unreadable. My daughter filed this report? She asked the officer. Yes, ma'am. She contacted us with her concerns. Esin looked at the officer for a long moment. Then she said, I'd like to show you something. She led them to the small office where she kept her home security system. She pulled up footage from the past 2 weeks. The officers watched, and then they understood. The footage showed Adora entering the house with her spare key on a Thursday afternoon while Chaik was out driving Esin to a therapy appointment. Adora went to the bedroom, opened the drawer, removed the envelope, removed the bracelet, then left. The officers were very quiet. Esin stood at the door of the office, leaning on her cane, and said nothing. Adora was not charged. Esin did not push for charges. But when Adora arrived at the house that evening, confident and composed, ready to appear sympathetic and concerned, her mother met her at the door. I saw the footage, Esin said. Adora's face went through 3 separate expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Mom, I can explain. You came into my house. You stole from me. Then you called the police on the man you stole from. I was worried about you. I thought you could remove him. You thought if he looked like a thief, I'd send him away. Adora shifted. Her chin lifted. The old defensiveness returned like armor. You trust a stranger more than your own daughter. Do you know how that makes me feel? After everything I've done for you? After my whole life being about you? Stop. The word landed quietly, but it stopped Adora cold. Esin looked at her daughter, really looked at her, not with anger, not with hurt, with something more final than both. Go home, she said. Mom. Go home, Adora. She closed the door. If you're still watching up to now, type I'm still here in the comment section. This story is far from over, and what comes next will leave you speechless. 3 months into Chaik's work at the house, he found the papers. He had been helping Esin organize her files at her request. She wanted her affairs in order. Nothing unusual about that for a woman of her age. But as he worked through old folders in the study, certain documents began to catch his attention. A deed for a parcel of farmland in Georgia signed over, dated 6 years ago. The signature did not look quite right. A transfer record for a commercial property in South Carolina, dated 4 years ago. The same unfamiliar signature. He brought the documents to Esin. Quietly, without alarm, without accusation. She put on her reading glasses. She looked at the papers for a long time. I didn't sign these, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled, but her hand trembled slightly on the page. Are you sure? Chaik asked. I know my own signature. I've been signing documents for 50 years. I did not sign these. They brought in a forensic documents examiner through her attorney. The results came back within 2 weeks. The signatures were forgeries, high quality, convincing at a glance, but forged. The trail, once pulled, unraveled fast. Adora had been systematically transferring or liquidating portions of her mother's estate for years. She had started carefully, taking properties that Esin Rarely reviewed rural land older. Investments. She had used a notary who was later found to have been paid generously for his cooperation. She had moved the money through layered accounts, some of which led back to gambling debts, owed to people whose patience she had exhausted. When the total was finally assessed, Adora had stolen somewhere between $2 and $3 million from her own mother over 7 years. Essen sat with that number for a very long time. She did not cry. She did not scream. She sat in her armchair and looked out the window at the evening coming down and said nothing for almost an hour. Chaik sat nearby without speaking. He had learned that she did not always need words. Sometimes she just needed to not be alone while she felt something. Finally she said, "She's been stealing from me for 7 years. Yes. While I was helping her. While I was sending her money. While I was telling people she was my greatest achievement. Yes." Another silence. Why? Did she need that much money? Chaik said carefully. Gambling. Loans. Spending. Essen closed her eyes. She was drowning, she said softly. And instead of coming to me, she just took. Yes. I would have helped her. Her voice cracked slightly. Just once. If she had come to me and said I'm in trouble, I would have helped her. I would have given her whatever she needed. She knows that. She has always known that. Chaik said nothing. She didn't come to me because she knew I would also ask questions. And she didn't want the questions. She just wanted the money. She opened her eyes. The crack in her voice was gone. What replaced it was something calmer and more final. Call the attorney, she said. I want to review everything. The legal process moved carefully. Essen chose not to press criminal charges. A decision that was entirely hers and Chaik respected without comment. But she moved swiftly to secure what remained of her assets. New accounts. New documentation. Her attorney worked long hours untangling the damage and rebuilding proper records. And then, 2 months later, Mama Eason became suddenly ill. It started with nausea, then extreme fatigue, then a day when she could not keep food down at all. Chaik noticed it first, as he always noticed things first, and insisted she be taken to the hospital. The doctors ran tests. The results came back within 48 hours. Traces of a toxic compound had been found in her system. The levels were not immediately lethal, but the compound was consistent with long-term slow poisoning. Something that, over weeks or months, would progressively weaken the organs and make the eventual death appear to be natural causes. A woman of 72 with a history of surgery. Nobody would look twice. The police were called. The investigation pointed toward her medication. Someone had tampered with one of her prescription bottles. Someone with access to the house. Someone with a spare key. Adora was brought in for questioning. She denied everything. She had a lawyer within hours. The evidence was circumstantial enough that no charges were immediately filed, though the investigation remained open. But Eason did not need a court verdict. She already knew everything she needed to know. Chaik came to her room that night after the police left and found her sitting up in bed completely composed. You should rest, he said. I've been resting, she replied. Sit down. I want to ask you something. He sat Why do you do this work? He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked down at his hands. My mother, he said. She got sick when I was younger. She was alone. Her family, my aunts, my cousins, people who should have been there, they found reasons not to be. They were busy. They had their own lives. She needed care and nobody came. He paused. She died alone in a hospital bed. The nurses were kind, but they were busy. She died with no one holding her hand. Ezen was very still. I was overseas at the time. Couldn't get back in time. By the time I landed, she was already gone. His voice was even, but the effort behind the evenness was visible. I made a decision after the funeral. I wasn't going to let that happen to anyone else I could reach. If I could be there, I was going to be there. Ezen reached over and took his hand. Her grip was firm despite everything. She raised a good son, she said. He looked up. His eyes were bright. She tried to, he said. She succeeded, Ezen said. They sat together in the quiet of the evening. Outside the window, the neighborhood settled into its nighttime rhythms, and something moved between them, not romantic, not transactional, but real. The kind of bond that only forms between people who have seen each other clearly and stayed. Anyway, a few weeks later, Ezen asked her attorney to come to the house. She gave instructions. They were precise, detailed, and final. She asked that everything be kept confidential. No one was told. No announcements. No warnings. Life continued as it had. Chaik continued his work. Adora continued her silence, broken only by occasional formal phone calls that Ezen answered politely and briefly. The seasons changed. The lawyers finalized everything. 4 months later, Mama Ezen passed away at home early in the morning, peacefully. Chaik was in the next room. He heard the change in her breathing and came to her side. She was conscious. Her eyes were open. You stayed, she said to him. I stayed, he said. She closed her eyes. He held her hand until the breathing stopped. The day of the will reading arrived on a gray Thursday morning. The attorney's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown. The room had a long table and several chairs and a window that looked out over the city. Edora arrived in a cream and gold outfit. She carried a structured handbag. She sat down and crossed her legs and looked around the room with the expression of someone who has already rehearsed their acceptance speech. There were other relatives present. 2 of Ezen's cousins. A niece who had stayed in touch over the years. Chaik sat quietly at the far end of the table in his good clothes, unsure entirely why he had been asked to attend. The attorney began with the standard formalities. Then he cleared his throat. He read through the smaller bequests first. A sum to each of the cousins. A gift to the niece. A contribution to a church in Nigeria that Ezen had supported for 20 years. Then he looked up. He looked directly down the table at Chaik. And he said, the entirety of the remaining estate, including all properties, investment accounts, and liquid assets, is to be transferred in full to Mr. Chaik Okafor. The room did not react immediately. There was a half-second where everyone simply processed what they had heard. Then Edora laughed a Short, disbelieving sound. I'm sorry, she said. Can you read that again? The attorney read it again. The laugh disappeared. That's not possible, Eudora said. Her voice was still, controlled, but the edges were fraying. That's not possible. She would never. Mrs. Obi's instructions were very clear, the attorney said. He manipulated her. Eudora stood up. The chair scraped back hard. He was in that house every single day. She was sick. She was vulnerable. He took advantage of an elderly woman who didn't know. Ms. Obi, the attorney's voice was quiet but firm. Your mother anticipated this response. He opened a folder. Before proceeding with the estate transfer, I am required to present the following documentation. He laid pages on the table one by one. Medical evaluations from 3 separate physicians confirming Eason's full cognitive competence at the time the will was revised. Financial records showing the unauthorized property transfers, the forged signatures, the layered accounts, security footage, time-stamped of the theft from the bedroom, witness statements from the neighbors, from the physical therapist, from the hospital nurses who had noted in Eason's chart the emotional impact of her daughter's absence during recovery. A toxicology report, a record of the police investigation. Eudora looked at the pages spreading across the table, and the color drained from her face slowly, the way paint washes from a wall in rain. This is the setup, she said, but the conviction was gone from her voice. Nobody in the room spoke. The cousins looked at the table. The niece looked at her hands. Chaik sat very still. The attorney said quietly, There is one final document. He produced a sealed envelope. Mrs. Obi's last letter. She asked that it be read aloud. He opened it. The room was completely silent. He began to read. Eudora, I have spent more hours thinking about how to say this than you would believe. There is no version of this letter that doesn't break my heart, but I raised you to face hard truths, so I will give you one now. Blood made you my daughter, but character makes someone family. When I could not walk, you disappeared. When I could not stand, you sent me to voicemail. When I spent 7 hours on the floor of my own kitchen calling your name, you were taking photographs of your dinner. I do not tell you these things to punish you. I tell you because I want you to understand what you chose. You did not just abandon me. You chose money over love so many times that eventually there was no love left in the choosing. Chaik stayed. When the nights were long, he stayed. When the fear was heavy, he stayed. When there was nothing to gain and no one watching, he stayed. I am not punishing you by leaving him my estate. I am simply telling the truth about who showed up. I hope you will spend the rest of your life choosing differently. I hope you will find your way back to something real. I forgive you, but forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. And trust, once gone, does not return because we wish it to. Take care of yourself, Ada. Your mother loved you. She always will. The attorney folded the letter. The room remained silent for a long time. Eudora was the first to move. She picked up her handbag. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame, but did not turn around. Then she left. In the months that followed, Chaik did what very few people do when sudden wealth arrives. He took his time. He sat with it. He thought carefully about what Mama Izenwa had spent her life building and what she would have wanted it to become. Then he established a foundation. He named it after her. The Ezenwa Obi Foundation provided housing assistance, medical support, and daily companionship programs for elderly people living alone. Within the first year, it reached over 400 seniors across 3 states. By the second year, it had partnered with local hospitals and community organizations to create a full network of professional caregivers trained in the model Chaik had always practiced. Present, honest, genuinely there. Every single person who came through the foundation's doors received a card on arrival. The card had a simple message printed on the front. Someone stayed for you. This is where we leave Mama Ezen's story. A woman who arrived in a foreign country with $300 and a ferocity that could not be taught, who built an empire from sacrifice, who loved her daughter with everything she had, and who in the final chapter discovered that the greatest wealth she had ever possessed was not in any account or on any deed. It was the simple, radical act of being truly seen and truly cared for by another human being. The lesson she left behind is not really about inheritance. It is about showing up for the people who need us before it is too late. Before the silence becomes permanent. Before someone is lying on a kitchen floor for 7 hours wondering why no one came. Chaik understood that lesson before Ezen taught it. His mother had taught it to him first in the hardest possible way. He carried it forward and Ezen saw that he did. And that is what she paid for with her estate, not loyalty, not service, the living proof. That presence is the rarest gift a person can give. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. It means everything to us that you stayed. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone in your life who needs you to show up, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us the moment in this story that hit you hardest. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, so you never miss a story like this one. We put everything into these videos, and knowing you're here makes every moment worth it. See you in the next one.